Not whiskey in the jar.
Okay, well, first off, who all participated in the Kickstarter for Guide to Glorantha?
Yeah.
So, first thing we wanted to just do is this is the finished, complete manuscript, less the very last round of crowdsource copy edits that are still going in, and the deadline to receive all of those is the end of Gen Con, because I can't enter any edits that anybody finds, and at this point it's all unbelievably nitpicky stuff. Like, hey Jeff, you gave a list of locations on page 307, and not all of them in this list are alphabetized. So I mean, which is a wonderful feeling. You know, it's not anymore. It's nothing like, hey, you know, there's a sentence that doesn't make any sense. It's the super nitpicky, you know, that you used a semicolon when you should have used a comma.
Question: weren't there going to be appendices on the God Learners and the Videlian?
Oh no! Well, no. There is to be material on the God Learners, the Videlian. Now, things that I couldn't thematically fit into the core book as I imagined it, I threw on as appendices. Now, part of that is, I absolutely love The Lord of the Rings. When I was a kid, I thought Appendix A, Appendix B, Appendix C, and Appendix D was just the coolest damn thing to throw into a fictional book. All right, so that's, if you want to know the honest truth of why there were appendixes, that's the reason why. But we've got the God Learner material is in there.
Yeah.
And we went back, and Greg and I worked on it, and there is the God Learner secret is in this book. There is what we know. What we know that is the God Learner secret from a Gloranthan perspective. Now, there is a completely outside of Gloranthan explanation of what the God Learners are, which is not going to go into this book. But because it's a, you know, outside of Glorantha, from a writer's perspective or from a rule designer perspective, the God Learners are those players who take a fantasy setting designed for role-playing games and they mini-max the rules and figure that through understanding the way the rule system works, you can understand the entire machinations of the literary setting. So, but that doesn't, you don't put that in a book.
Until they literally pissed off the DM and rocks down and they died.
Yes, that's exactly, literally, that is what the that is the extra Gloranthan God Learner secret, where it was people who took the rule system and believed that the literary setting was controlled by the external rule system, and by mastering the arcana of RQ2, you could, well, RQ2 says that you have third level, you know,
I don't even know
I barely remember.
A Rune Lord.
Well, a Rune Lord can only do such and such, and a rune spells can only go up. We have no higher than a 3-point rune spell, stackable, etc. And through understanding the way that these rule systems work together, well, you know, Stafford, how can you do this in a story? It's outrageous. The rules don't work this way.
So was Robin D. Laws a gift bringer?
In a way.
Well, I like to think of Robin as more a follower of Harmast, a guy doing a guy following in an ancient hero quest and ending up doing his own thing in the process. But the Gloranthan God Learner secret is in the book. It's in many places. There is not a giant neon sign in the book that says, here be the God Learner secret. But one of the things that Greg emphasized to me is that although it was poorly expressed in previous books, the God Learner secret was revealed in Cults of Terror. But wasn't given any context or explanation. And there's much more context. For instance, if you look at the Mythic Maps section, that talks a lot about the God learner's approach to understanding the world and why, if you want to understand Glorantha from how the myths intersect, what the overall structure of the myths are, you look to what the God learners did, because they did manage to systemize most of Glorantha mythology. Not in that they changed it, but in that they were the first group of people that, one, were in constant contact with a very wide and different group of cultures from all around the world. And they approached their understanding of magic through manipulation of the runes. They managed to look through and say, okay, what is the myth of Glorantha and Ernalda really about? Well, it's about the marriage of air, this force, and the and of earth. Well, what other myths? What other people have the same myth? Oh, it appears over and over and over again in multiple cultures, and this is the so-called Glorantha monomyth, because there is a monomyth. There is a mythical unity to Glorantha, and a lot of people, particularly a lot of fan discussions in the 90s and in the 2000s, people speculate, well, the whole idea of a monomyth, that was simply a God-learner creation. And it wasn't. There is a thematic mythological unity to Glorantha. The Orlanthi and the Dare Happens, they may disagree on the meaning of mythological events
How they interpret it.
and on the interpretation, but they do agree on a tremendous amount of events that occurred in the god tale.
So the Darahapanil really is the same entity as the Bad Emperor in Orlanthi mythology?
They are identified, the Orlanthi identify Yelm as being that same. And the reason I'm hedging on this is the correct answer is yes and no. Well, because this is another thing about polytheism, is that in polytheistic societies are perfectly capable of accepting that there's more than one sun god. And then there's 6, 7. The Hittites had at least 5 sun gods, all who were part of the state religion. But they also would refer to the sun as a singular entity. That's normal in polytheistic societies. Now we can't help, regardless of your personal, religious, or theological bent, we in the modern West cannot help but tend to try to interpret mythology in a monotheistic manner. That, how can there be Yelm and Elmal? That's absurd. There's one that's right and one that's wrong.
Certainly from what I know about ancient Greek religion, there was a certain amount of ambiguity as to whether the different aspects or versions of Zeus worshipped at different sites, to what extent they were all the same Zeus.
But what's particularly interesting to me about that is the Greeks were particularly ambivalent about whether that mattered in the slightest. Was the Zeus at Dodona the same entity as the Jupiter of the Capitoline Hill, who is was he that the same entity as is it Jupiter of Iamblokos, the Jupiter who was always depicted standing on top of a bull, which was a very popular cult with the Roman military in the 2nd century AD. If you go to Germany, in almost all of the old legionary camps, they had a cult shrine to Jupiter standing on a bull. Is that the same? Are those all the same entities? Yeah. Are they all different entities? Yeah. Does it matter? Not really. And that's an ambivalence that a Gloranthan would, an in-world Gloranthan would get instantly, but we, you know, as a writer, as players, as GMs, it's really hard for us to be able to approach that polytheistic mindset.
Yeah, even in the setting, you have the god learners who approach, who are antagonistic towards that viewpoint, try to stuff them all.
And that's what the god learners tried to do, is the god learners tried to say, well, yeah, but they're all the same thing, aren't they? And we can,
Like, look, we can just stuff them in the same box.
Well,
yeah.
that backfired. I mean,
And that's a big part of the backfiring
and
of
it
it.
turns out that one grain goddess isn't the same as another grain goddess.
Or isn't entirely the same.
Yeah, exactly.
In some contexts, one green goddess is the same as another green goddess.
Well, I know Sandy always used to say there was a lot of overlap.
Yeah. It's like a Venn diagram with the
Yeah.
god learners made the mistake of thinking that overlap is the whole circle.
Which is funny, because you'd think that would be easier to get from a sorcerer's perspective, where the otherworld entities are basically big energy patterns.
Yes, well, that's how they approached all of this. But the other thing that the god learners did is the god learners found that it was often easier to manipulate these energy patterns if you had people performing theistic sacrifices to them.
So, oh god, so the Ricari are right. They really were tainted by theism.
Well, they were not only tainted by
Well, I mean,
theism,
not just
they
yeah.
were, for instance, and if you read through the guide, you'll get hints and bits and pieces about this, but there were several theistic sacrificing cults that wholeheartedly participated in the god learners' activities. And one of have to read through the entire gigantic book and put together the pieces, but I'm going to give you the cheat sheet answer, because there's only the 6 of us and whoever's watching this on YouTube. Lankromai. The Lankromai cult, in many places, willingly and happily cooperated with the god learners, because the Lankromai is about the accumulation and understanding of knowledge. And what were the god learners trying to do?
Figure it all.
To figure it all out, man. If you were a second age Lankromai sage in Ralios, or in Slantos, or in Cathala, or in Umathela,
Lankromai's got ties to the sorcerer world anyway.
Exactly.
So
Exactly. And you had, that was probably the most prominent. Another one that had, another cult that was spread because of its remarkable use to the Middle Sea Empire was Isseries. And you will find Isseries cults, if you carefully read through the guide. There are Isseries cults in Colorado. There are Isseries cults in Teshnos. There are Isseries cults everywhere the Middle Sea Empire used to rule, because it was really useful. So the Godliners weren't, I mean, there's some of the, and I don't want to be disparaging of fan speculation, but there was some fan speculation of what the Godliners were trying to do was destroy all these cults. Nonsense. The Godliners found them incredibly useful, and many Godliners who began as sorcerers ended up finding that it made it easier for them to increase their own power, increase their own ability to manipulate the other world. But yeah, well, I'll also offer sacrifices to God X or God Y. Heck, I'll even join its mysteries because I can learn things.
This makes them sound even more like the Lunars.
Oh, yeah, very much so.
Didn't a lot of the gods get induced? Did they become saints within?
We've gotten rid. Okay, the term saint. The term,
a little too.
well, the problem is it
specific
has
in modern day
connotations that Greg did not intend.
Yeah.
The Greg never intended, and keep in mind, Greg wrote the West
Yeah.
before he ever imagined the Orlanthi or the Lunars. Greg wrote his material on the West between 1966 and 1974.
But when we first get published material in the West, in the Glorantha in the Garnatella box set, it's totally medieval Europe.
Yep,
So
yep.
where did that come from?
That came from trying to put something together for Avalon Hill within their deadline.
And also one of the most regrettable words that Greg wishes he would never use, which was referring to them as knights.
Yeah, and Greg
That opened 1,000 doors. Well, knights,
kind of
they go to cathedrals, and they have saints, and there's a pope. And
But a better way of thinking of the Malchione, in my and the model I use is they are much more pre-Socratic Greek philosophers. They don't worship the gods because a man is capable of using his will and his intellect in order to control and shape his surroundings. Worshipping a god, these energy sources, means essentially enslaving yourself to something that should be serving you.
Even the invisible god?
The invisible god is different, because the invisible god is not like these energy sources. It's not contactable. You don't get any magic from the invisible god. You can't initiate yourself to him.
So it's more like mysticism.
He's logos.
Ah.
He is the invisible god is the first word.
Yeah, but it's not the sort of Christian logos incarnate.
No. He is the Greek philosophical logos. There is a thought, and this thought permeates through the universe, providing its structure, and we men are capable of understanding how all of this fits together. And you can learn this. And why would you enslave yourself to an energy source? Or even worse, why would you make pacts with little tiny energy sources when you can just figure out, well, that energy source is the air, is a manifestation of the air rune. It's a devolution of this primal force, and I know how to make that primal force do things. I know the rituals and the procedures to make that rune do what I want.
So it's like a cross between Neoplatonism with a little Enlightenment deism.
Yes. And that is, if you read the really old stories that Greg did, that was what his sorcerers were like. And the sorcerers were not medieval Christians in the slightest. Their dislike of theism was that it weakens you. It enslaves you to forces that should be serving you. And you'll get a lot of that in the guide. There's a lot on the Videli as well on the guide.
Yeah, just to be clear, just to go full circle on your question, a lot of the material would just fit better if you put some of like Secrets of the Videli in with certain Videli information.
So for instance,
as
if
opposed
you look
to Appendix 6s.
So it's not all in one place.
If it worked better and having it in a couple of places, that's what it is. If it didn't really fit like that, then we put an appendix at the end. But we went through a checklist of all the stretch goals. I grabbed them all off the website, put them all into an Excel file. Yes, no, kind of like red, yellow, green, a little, a lot, all the way.
What about Mark Kleinhagen's?
Right, now Mark's is going to be, because Mark's material is not the same author, the same style, that is going to be available, because it's also not very long. It really made no sense to put it in the book itself. It will be an accessible PDF for everybody who participated in this. It's not very long. If people really want me to print it, I can print out a very, very short couple of pages of stuff and glue it together. But it doesn't fit right into the book. And I thought it was more important to have the book be thematically as unified together, and then include something in that is interesting, but it's sort of a weird tangent within the book. And that was a artistic decision that I made. I think everybody will be happy with that.
If you read the material, won't cost you anything.
Yep. And the other thing I did is I beefed up the material on Vivmort and vampires anyways. That is the pure canonical take on what are vampires, what are the types of undead in Glorantha, what is their connection with chaos, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's in the section on Secrets of Chaos. And I thought that that would be overall more interesting and more valuable, because a big part of the guide is you take this guide, and if you want to, for instance, if you want to make material, submit material to us in the future, and it's compatible with the guide, you're not going to have canonical trouble. I mean, really big purpose of this whole book is to have in one place. This is, we are not going to Greg this. Greg is contractually forbidden as part of the transfer of ever Gregging the Guide to Glorantha or the forthcoming Gods of Glorantha.
It really is the end of an era.
It really, Greg is totally cool with that.
It wasn't like Greg enjoyed it. It was humorous on occasion and entertaining.
Well, I just kind of pictured you guys writing your books and Greg calling up and said, "I had this great idea."
Okay, actually, the thing is, Greg often will call up and say, you know, this is something that's really important to understanding part of Glorantha. Call up and for instance, this is one. Loscom.
Might want to zoom in.
Yeah, let's zoom in a little bit about Loscom. Everybody knows what Loscom is? The idealistic area that had managed to remove itself from the surrounding impure world to be able to develop the perfect utopian society where everybody had their place. There was no civil strife. It really, really was what they said it was during the ban.
And now the ban is down.
Now the ban is gone. The real world, the rest of this impure material world with all of its grubby confusion is intruding in waves.
That got more death on a horse.
And the Kingdom of War is the biggest manifestation of that. Well, Loscom, from a literary side, so I'm going to get away from talking about Glorantha as just a fictional setting in its own right. Loscom is something that Greg was first writing about in the mid-70s. And look at the shape of Loscom with its two peninsulas around a bay. And you've got some kind of hills over here. Why are you hitting that?
San Francisco.
It's the disillusionment of that whole San Francisco, Berkeley experience of having for a brief, because Greg was right in the middle of that, and you had this moment where folk really felt that everything was coming together. We were on the verge there in the Bay Area of having utopia. And what do we have by 1972? We've got, you know, the Manson murder. We've had the Manson murders. We're now, our motto now for our champion for the Bay Area is Dirty Harry, and that was a big. There's a lot of these sort of themes that when we were putting this together, it was very important to be talking to Greg as a writer, and not merely as trying to figure out, well, Greg, you wrote X, Y, and Z, and looking at it purely from, a whole bunch of Gloranthan scriptings. A lot of what I was doing working with Greg for the last 10 years has been, Greg, what's, thematically, what is this? And that's it. If you read in Glorantha, one of the reasons I think it is a very powerful fantasy setting is one of the most commonly repeated themes in Glorantha over and over and over again is folk getting together for a noble purpose, trying to do something new, changing things, making the world better, and then eventually that better, noble cause corrupts in on itself, collapses in just a tumult of disillusionment.
Like the broken council.
Like the Broken Council, like Nizalor, like the Lunar Empire, like the Godlearners.
Like the Storm Tribe?
The Storm Tribe never so much, because the difference is within the Orlanthi is Orlanth does, when Orlanth's kind of Arthurian kingdom of heroes around his table all starts collapsing because of chaos. Orlanth gathers some companions and makes new ones, travels down into the underworld, and does make those compromises that almost every other time within Glorantha doesn't happen. And that's one of the reasons the Lightbringer's quest really sticks out within Glorantha, is it's one of the most, there is positive, uplifting potential, but at the same time there is a natural cycle that things rise, no matter how noble your goals are, there will always be this coming down, and that the right thing to do. And again, I'm not speaking as a Gloranthan, I'm speaking is from a literary perspective. It's crashing down. Do we admit our screw-ups and make amends and try to salvage something, or do we just ride this thing down to the bottom in an orgy of destruction, like with the Godlearners, like with the EWF, like with the Broken Council?
Like what happens in the world, in the real world.
And this is part of the reason that as a writer, I so love this setting, because, you know, I'm a gigantic Tolkien fan, I confess it, but the themes in Tolkien are, in some ways, they're more manichaeistic. Now you don't tend to have, Numenor is an exception, but you don't tend to have this inevitable rise and fall, and no matter how pure Aragorn never does horrible things that he regrets that he has to grapple with. Whereas in Glorantha, that's implicit for all humans. Now the gods don't necessarily have that because they're divine. But the gods can't act anymore. And they are bound by the Great Compromise.
Well, with one exception.
With one exception.
Well, this makes me really curious. I'm going to need to reread Prince of Sarder, or reread the...
Reread King of... Read the version that will be... Reread it when it comes out with the expanded and annotated version.
Yeah, because it makes me really curious, because the stuff about Arbrath's empire and the Temple of the Reaching Storm sounds kind of ominous in that way.
There's a lot of... Well, and that's part of what... maybe we'll talk about it now, or maybe we'll talk about it later. There's a lot about the hero wars in the Guide to Glorantha.
Yeah.
Big section.
I've seen the PDF.
Yeah.
There's a lot of hints in that. One of the things we initially wrote the Secrets of the Hero Wars sections as a chronology of the major Hero Wars events that went in. And again, I made the artistic decision, and was writing this with Greg and with Nick Brook, and I think Sandy weighed in on some of this. And there was a real concern that writing this as a fixed future chronology was disempowering to people wanting to explore Glorantha through the role-playing game setting. And so instead, what there is future pieces, some of which are set later in the Hero Wars period looking back. Some are from the Fourth Age perspective, so after the future Hero Wars, trying to figure out what was going on with this whole Hero Wars thing. And we've given actually everything that was in the chronology is in the Secret of the Hero Wars section, but we pulled away almost in every case the dates so that, you know, your Glorantha will vary. But you don't have to feel constrained. You don't have to feel, well, my game has to have X happen on date Y. Because, but
there's a lot more like prophecy here.
Yes, and you can use it as prophecy.
You should use it as prophecy.
You should use it as prophecy.
Well, still, as a Lunar fan, I'm still a little disappointed by the appearance.
Oh, by the what?
By the apparent conclusion to the glorious history of the Red Goddess.
Red Goddess wins.
Rocks fall, everybody dies.
No, Red Goddess is liberated.
Oh,
The Red Goddess ascends as the White Moon. The White Moon is the next phase.
So there is a White Moon in the Fourth Age, because King Asarter was kind of ambiguous.
Well, King Asarter, well, first off, keep in mind, there will never be a Fourth Age book. And I will happily, and this is Greg as well, we will always happily be contradictory about the Fourth Age.
Yeah, well, it's just the tidbits about the Fourth Age and King Asarter make it sound pretty shitty.
Yeah, keep in mind, the Hero Wars, the Hero Wars does destroy Glorantha. And there is that final Atuma at the end of the Hero Wars that allows a rebirth of the world. But the world, I mean, it's cataclysmic, the wars of the Hero Wars. Horrible, horrible, horrible things happen. The seas flood all of the coastal realms of the world. The seas flood Darahapa again. The ice comes down again. The dwarfs destroy everyone in the lower quarter of the world because Umathela, unless they can stop the dwarves, is doomed.
So everybody in Umathela dies?
No, but if you're in the Umathela, the dwarfs,
Well, to be fair, the Videli helped the dwarves.
Yeah, the Videli are the best allies.
Don't give the dwarves all the credit for that.
But the dwarves, and this was the thing that there were hints about way, way, way back. Greg, you gotta make we have to make this stuff apparent. But what the dwarves are going to do, if you look at the mythic maps.
Can you show them the picture?
Yeah, let's look at the mythic map. I mean, this is not our motto is setting Glorantha back 30 years. This is not new stuff. This is stuff that for whatever reason, Chaosium took the approach that, well, what we're going to do is we're going to do a whole series of books that will eventually, which will eventually get to this once we figure out how to make the rule system capable of handling this. But you go back, there's Chaosium internal documents from, what, 84?
Well,
that spells out all of the big events.
The Arcane Lords, Mortal Lords supplement, it's almost like, I swear, we don't have all the answers on why they never got it finished, but it's almost like it was just too tough and they just kind of gave up on it. And so some of Greg's writings just sat on the shelf. But we have access to all of that because we got box after box after box after box shipped to us. Because Greg's letting all that go because he wants to get it out there and he knows at his age and everything else that it's time for other people to pick all that up and carry on with it and worked with us for a number of years. That's why he was very comfortable, selling us the rights.
So if you look at this here.
Yeah, selling their old territory back.
Right, because that's the staging grounds to reconstruct the world machine. And so, what was that?
It has to be a square.
It has to be square.
It's
And
easy
if
square.
you look at where this is on the big map, and it's all in the guide. All of this is in the guide. You can piece all of this together. It's not.
Jeff's goal is to see how he can make his computer go to a crawl because of how
That's the 30 by 30 foot map.
I'm not going to play around with this too much because I just want to show you. We don't need
Yeah,
this.
but it's Umathela.
It's
oh, wow. So it's
Drastella is the dwarf nerve center. Carustus is what is left of the mythological dwarf. It's what's left of Mostel's Mountain. That's actually where Mostel was. Is here. That's dwarf. That's the dwarf Jerusalem. That's the nerve center, and the dwarves are building there about 1624. Those, you know, those giant cement concrete ships they have.
Oh yeah.
Are pulling out huge cables between here and here, and they're just going to raise all the land here.
God.
And that's how they're going to. Oh yeah.
Can we show them the capstone?
Oh yeah.
One of the really great pieces of art that's just getting wrapped up right now is a picture of it's. I don't know on the screen if you get the true scale of it, but imagine a huge column, almost like the Wheel of Pain, you know, Conan. But instead of people pushing it, they have brontosauruses that are turning this around. They're all harnessed up to it, and the dwarves are using them to just wind.
Okay, this is from Jan Pospisil. It's a this is the work in progress. But you guys have seen some of Jan's stuff?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is just we're working on the composition here, and the problem with dwarves is they're short, and that actually makes it a pain in the butt to be able to show a variety of dwarf things. So Jan and I have been working about, well, we'll have a Quicksilver dwarf using some sort of alchemically powered steam pack that's got him here, and for whatever reason, we've got to work out the story, but the Iron Dwarf is holding up the Gold Dwarf. And the reason we got to do that is to be able to let you guys see the degree of variety between the casts. But that's what Rick, this is Indrastella, Incrust. This is called Capstone. There's this huge adamantine pillar that the cable is around. And they've got this mess of dinosaurs and gelanti that are going to rise this up. And they're going to raise back that continent. And that continent, that's Drastella, that's Salon, that's Umathella. So now, the Umathellan story on this, and the Fonridians, is the dwarves. What the hell were the dwarves doing?
Well, yeah, but that's what everybody said about the dwarves.
Yeah, but if the dwarves can succeed on this, and so if you're doing an Umathellan campaign, you know, initially it's, okay, we're Umathellans, we've got to, boy, oh, we hate the Videli, we hate the Fenritans, well, yeah, we get along just fine with the elves.
So, that reminds me, why are the Videli helping with this? I mean, what the hell do they want?
Well, okay, here's the insight of the Videli. There was, Peter Metcalf wrote a thing many, many years ago about the Videli, about how they're, you know, icky. They're not. Videli are not a icky people. They are sociopaths. They are an entire culture of sociopaths. The Videli can be superficially charming. They can be, they can superficially pretend to be empathic, but they are absolutely sociopathic. And the dwarves offer them power. And their plan is, of course, to betray the dwarves once they've gotten everything they want from the dwarves.
How exactly is Videlian law different from Ruthenian law?
Well, the Videli would say that theirs is the real Ruthenian.
Going way back to the original.
Yeah, but I mean, the stuff about horrible rituals with cannibalism and incest, is that not
If
true?
it gets the Videli power, they'll do anything. They encourage the worship of chaos gods. They have made pacts with chaos gods because it got them power. So basically imagine what a truly sociopathic culture that wanted to get themselves ahead and could care less about the consequences.
Total indifference to genocide,
genocide means nothing to them.
What keeps them from killing off each other?
That is, they obey their caste laws internally. If they started killing off each other, if you killed another Videli,
You would start
Age.
aging. Okay,
And so it's not morality that holds them into place, it's pure self-interest.
So they have to work together in order to survive.
They have to work together in order to remain immortal. And if you're a Videli, well, upon death, there's nothing after death.
How big is their culture?
There's about 140,000 Videli. I think it's about 140,000 Videli in the whole world.
Most are brown.
Most are brown, and the brown are powerful magicians in their own right, just as the brown castes of the Videli are powerful magicians. Oh, you know that, right? The Brithini castes are colors as well.
Yeah.
The difference is the Videli's argument about why they're the true Brithini is the Videli still look like the way that the true Malchioni looked in the God's Age. Their working caste has brown skin. Their magician caste has blue skin. Their warrior class has red skin. Whereas the Brithini are impure.
You forgot one.
And then there's the yellow Brithini, or the golden Brithini, or Videli, which is a ruler caste.
Yeah, I mean, what's the deal with that? I mean, there's been speculation ever since the whole color caste correspondence was revealed.
Would you need a lot of people dying as some great sacrifice? Would that be enough to perhaps bring back a leader?
Ooh. Right, so that's why the Videli are helping.
Yeah, they're bringing back their full. They're trying to bring back all of their castes in order to bring back. And look at this map. The Videli Empire was one of the biggest empires in the world.
Yeah.
The Videli,
Right next to the dwarves too.
all of that was the Videli Empire.
Well, they were the ones who invented tapping, weren't they?
No, tapping is inherent in the Malchioni way.
Oh.
They're the first ones that figured out that you could not just tap things, but you could completely tap away. Normally you would tap something like a power source. So again, think of the 20th, 21st century bit of they're the folk that, oh, you know, okay, yeah, who cares whether the resource is renewable? I'm just going to take it all. And so, normally you would tap some bit of a magic, but you want that resource to remain, so why would you destroy it? Whereas the Videli's take on it was, screw it. I'll tap it down to nothingness.
They're just indifferent for this kind of thing.
We'll tap away all of your magical energy, and then we'll give what's ever left to it, the raw resources, i.e. the bones, the bones, the flesh, the corpse, whatever. We'll give those to the dwarves. They'll make their food out of it or something. I don't know.
I'm not really familiar with the Videlis, but what's sort of like the primary source of power?
Sorcery.
Sorcery, but do they do sacrifice?
No. Well, normally not. But if it's convenient for them, for instance, if there is a powerful chaotic force of energy, in the way, remember when we talked about how the God learners would offer sacrifice to theistic entities in order to have their magic work better? Videli do that all the time. Oh yeah, well, and they like to use chaotic, they are perfectly happy working with chaotic magic. And so, well, if worshipping, offering sacrifices to Thed makes my sorcery spells work better.
But how do they prevent the practice of using chaos magic to corrupt their sort of internal structure?
Yeah, it doesn't break the law.
Doesn't break the law. Doesn't break their laws, because it doesn't violate caste rules. And that's their only law. If you're a worker, you do the worker things. That's the only law.
Yeah.
That sociopathic culture. So the chaos, they're big on the chaos. Well, yeah, chaos causes huge amounts of problems.
But again, how does, the Brithini, they've always been described as amoral. So why are they different? Why are they, well, they're not nice, but they're not as horrible as the Videli.
Yes. The Brithini are not sociopathic. The Brithini they are very amoral, but the Brithini do have concerns about the consequences of their action. They'll commit genocide if it's necessary to preserve their existence, but they won't commit genocide because it might give them a big augment on a spell. Whereas the Videli would, perfectly happy wiping out thousands of people if it made their sorcery spell a little bit more powerful.
So their sociopathic nature sort of allows them to employ chaotic forces without it corrupting
they're already hopelessly
their
corrupt.
internal structure.
They're already hopelessly corrupt.
Mm.
I mean, the Videli are you don't get more evil than a bunch of sociopaths. They're already, they can't go any further down. But they don't become brew or whatnot.
Yeah, they're not chaotic, so.
Well, they are, or they. Remember how I say yes and no?
Oh.
They're not chaotic in a easy. You're a brew or you're an ogre or whatnot.
So
Chaotic neutral.
They're kind of the boring, predictable chaos.
Well, no, what they are so far gone.
What's their view on the Lunar Empire?
Is the Lunars useful to them? If the Lunar Empire is useful to them, but oh, by the way, are the Glorantha useful to us? Are the Storm Bulls at times useful to us? We don't.
So what did the Storm Bulls get? Did Storm Bulls get chaos?
I don't think. If you notice, there aren't any Videlian pracs. There aren't any Videli in the Holy Country. There aren't any Videli in places that the Storm Bull cult is strong. My own bit, and this is not in the guide, but my own take on it would be is that the Videli probably do give off chaos vibe to the Storm Bull cult. I mean, they are bad news. But where are the Videli? The Videli are in Drastella. They're in the Videli Islands. They're in the Malchione cities of Umathella, and they're in Fonrit. And Fonrit is also, Fonrit has chaos cults there. Storm Bull is not going to be exactly popular in Fonrit either.
One question. What is absolutely not useful for them?
For the Videli,
Yeah.
love,
Okay. There is
mercy,
Sentimentality.
nostalgia,
Nostalgia.
nostalgia,
That's
loyalty.
Long-term planning. Certain forms of long-term
Certain forms of long-term planning.
Well, then they are like sort of forfeiting one of the celestial gods, right? Celestial gods, for example, Valeria. She's the only one did it of the celestial corps,
Mhm.
I think.
She's the only one that still, according to the Godlanders, she's the only one whose position has not been replaced by a lesser, later entity.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyways, there's a lot on that, because I love the Videli. Especially realizing that they are the #1 ally of the dwarves. Because the one thing about the dwarves is, the dwarves are always useful.
They're rational.
They're so predictable.
Yeah.
So you always know, from the Videli point of view, well, you always know what the dwarves are going to do. And they're immortal as well. And they're very, very powerful. And the Videli also respect things that are more powerful than they are, until they can figure out how to backstab them. But
Work with them until you can beat them.
work with them until you can beat them. So there's a lot of material on that. There's a lot of material on Arkat in the book. There's a lot of material on the Broken Council. And those are just appendixes, though. I mean, the bulk of the book is the full gazetteer of everything in the setting.
All the geography, supersized and super detailed, going back to those stretch goals in particular.
Yep. Which we're hoping people will be pretty happy with. I mean, it's everything. But the other thing we try not to do is go, well, I don't know. Do we want to hold this back as a secret for a later publication? No, we want to give everything to you guys to be able to explore Glorantha, armed with the same information that the writers themselves have, and all in one place.
That way, if somebody comes to us and say they want to write a regional supplement on Umathella or you name any place on the map.
And there's still a lot of, you still got to do the gods of Glorantha.
Yes.
Well, that's not so much geographic
Yeah.
Just, you know, it's a different realm of information that obviously ties into it. And it complements it, and it is something that we plan on talking about this evening, the Gods of Glorantha book.
But you'd say that if there is a mystery in the guide, it's supposed to be a mystery. There's not a secret answer that will be revealed later.
I did not. We deliberately did not. We deliberately gave the full kit and caboodle, so that there are mysteries in there, and the truth is, there are things in there that if you really ask Greg and I, it'd be, well, you know, the only way we're ever going to find out the answer to that is to run a game there.
Short question. Do they have criminals or dissidents at all?
Well, if you violate Videlian caste law, you die. You die of old age. And that, to the Videli, because the Videli are immortal, who needs a criminal system?
So what happens to Videli who decide they actually like other people as more than tools, or does that never happen?
They die.
Oh, so that's also a violation.
Yeah, that's also a violation.
In their frame of reference, you just die.
Yeah, you die. You die of old age. And old age, when you've been living around for, you know, most cases, most of the Videli are as old as time itself.
Well, still, I've always thought that an ex-Brathini or an ex-Videli who was doomed but wouldn't die for another 30 years or so would make a good player character.
It would make a great player character, but from the Videli point of view, you don't punish them because they'll be dead soon.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're getting what they deserve soon enough. In some ways, aging
because they're weak.
Is so repulsive to the Videli. It's just a long torture sentence. Well, not long in terms of that, but
sentence.
Yeah,
it's
you get 30 years to enjoy that.
And you know the great thing about it is we don't have to do anything about it.
Is that a gray hair, Jeff? Oh my God, I think you're dying.
I judge you to death in 8 years' time.
Yeah.
But, okay. They sound like a really static, really non-changing culture. So
Absolutely.
how will they cope with the hero wars and things
They
like
hope to manipulate it to their advantage.
Since I don't think they're adaptable at all, and they might actually, if there is a major change in the way of the world, they might go under. I don't think they really
well, that's
realize
an issue,
that.
though. There's a lot of things that Videli don't realize, you know. But the Videli, because they're sociopathic, the Videli are very good at short-term opportunism, and they'll pivot on a dime. Oh,
yeah.
Would you? By the way, I know, Yaron, that you are a major Orlanthe leader that's capable of causing trouble for people that we consider more dangerous than you. Would you like some magical weapons and magical knowledge that'll let you break the Lunar Empire?
Sure.
Sure. Okay, no problem.
But it can be useful at times.
You had a question though?
Yeah.
It's you guys are. This is an ignorant question.
No.
Person
All
is
questions.
ignorant
All
about
questions are good.
But
I like
just
that.
thinking about you putting together this incredible amount of stuff. Were there contradictions that had to be ironed out?
Well, the spellings of a lot of things.
How many elves are in Malia anyway?
In where?
Malia.
The cult of Malia.
2 elves.
2 elves.
2 elves. God, nobody knows why it switched from 2 elves to 1 elf during the Avalon Hill period. Nobody knows.
It's almost like somebody didn't catch it.
Somebody didn't catch it, and that became the new standard guide. I mean, that happens.
We fixed that.
We fixed it.
So you fix it by going back to.
We set it back 30 years.
I set up internally. I set up internally a precedent. You know, which document has precedent over other documents.
Yeah.
And
You are talking to an ex-lawyer.
I am I'm a lawyer by training, and I built up my own. You know, the within our shop. You know, these are the things Greg wrote that are 100% correct. If something Greg wrote at a later period contradicted these documents, the older documents control. These are the documents that Greg wrote that were very early that are, there's a lot of truth to them, but
They were a work in progress.
They were a very early work in progress. And if you bought your old RQ2 Gloranthan material, more of that is right than anything else. That actually, and also another one that was very high on the internal canon list was White Bear, Red Moon.
The board game?
The board game.
Yeah.
The very first.
Had
Yeah.
lots of snippets of background.
Because that was that was very much the genesis of the setting. And if basically you were writing stuff that made, and Greg internally always refers back to that. Always within it, so much of his writings, is trying to, pulls back his old copy of White Bear, Red Moon, and tries to build back on it. So yeah, there was an immense amount of that.
Well,
Like the West, it just changed.
Right.
But in terms of contradictions in certain themes or bigger level contradictions?
I was kind of thinking of that rather than the spellings of names.
Sure, well, it was just an easy
No,
joke
no,
for me to make, and that's
One of the things about Greg's, the other bit is there was a lot of publications that had material that wasn't written by Greg.
Right.
A lot of that.
or his
and
name's
certainly
on
in
the-
the Isseries
Even if
material.
it's under his name.
Well, if his name's on the cover, doesn't mean he always
If it
wrote
says
a lot of
Greg
it.
Stafford and Friends,
Well, I mean, even this one says Greg Stafford, Jeff Richard, and Sandy Peterson, and all these other guys.
yes.
Sure.
But here's another thing. If people have written something that we've incorporated into the guide, or turned out to be very helpful in understanding the setting, and was helpful to Greg as well, damn right we're going to give credit. I mean, there's no reason not. Nick Brooke, for example, Nick Brooke wrote the Carmanian Empire. I mean, Greg basically had notes about what the Carmanians were like.
Well, he worked with Greg a long
And
time,
Nick gave this wonderful stuff. And Greg basically went to some of his old stuff and said, "No, this is the way it is. This is what I was trying. I couldn't write what Nick Brooke put together." And so, when you look at the stuff on Carmania, Nick Brooke developed that more than Greg did. And now Greg then later ran with that and went with that, but of course, if Nick's always going to get a credit for it. Sandy Peterson is a co-author because Sandy Peterson created a tremendous amount of Glorantha. There is
especially the further south you
the
go.
southern continent is got more Sandy in it than Greg does, than it has Greg. The Trolls have so much Sandy Peterson in it. Many of the Chaos cults have so much of Sandy in it. And the only other person that an argument could be made should be one of the co-authors of the guide, is Ken Rolston.
We've been playing Glorantha for hundreds of years, and we've never ever played one game in Polytheism.
Yeah. But Greg Sandy
You should.
so much about
Maybe
Pentatonic.
something
Yeah,
sometime next.
we definitely will.
Well, maybe I'll give it a try after this. You'll certainly have enough playable material.
Yeah, there's a lot more material. The best we had before this was Missing Land, and that was pretty sparse.
That was very sparse. And Sandy wrote was pretty much most of the Missing Lands material in Pentatonic. And same thing on the East Isles, actually. Most of the...
And with Keats, all that.
So much of that was Sandy. And so Sandy Peterson, should always be considered one of the co-authors of Glorantha as a book. Because
It's pretty safe to say with Gods of Glorantha, it's going to be pretty much the same thing.
Yeah.
And we can put our pitch in that Sandy's going to be at our booth tomorrow. So if you want to come by, I'm just
Yeah.
going to talk
Yeah,
about it.
Sandy flew
He'll
in
be
tonight.
pitching this other
he
thing.
was actually
It's
going
not
to
very
be here,
important,
but he had
he'll
to
be
do
at the booth as well.
a dinner for
Kickstarter-related
Kickstarter
stuff.
backers.
Yep.
And so we didn't have a lot of control about when this event would be.
Yeah, they pushed us around the schedule a fair bit on this one.
But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of Michael O'Brien, Mob. If people know who Michael O'Brien wrote, Sun County, wrote a lot of River of Cradles, wrote a lot of Strangers and Cracks. I mean, Michael O'Brien, I think is mentioned on the With Assistance From.
Yeah, right below the authors. The main authors.
Yeah.
And then part of it is just making sure that everybody, that respect is paid to the people who helped develop this setting and whose material has been incorporated into what is the final encyclopedia of Glorantha.
Now, it occurs to me that, sorry if I've been monopolizing, if you guys want to ask any other questions.
We're a small enough group, people just jump in.
Well,
And I know these guys pretty well. I know they're not shy.
I have a small question. I mean, Ratslav,
Yep,
he's a creature of disorder, right?
he's a creature of disorder, he's part of the Celestial Court.
Whatever happened to him?
He was destroyed by chaos.
By chaos. And the boggles?
The boggles were his creation. There are still a few boggles. At least in Sandy's campaign, there's a few boggles.
What do they look like?
They're constantly changing. They're disorder. They look like whatever their whim is to look like. So, how do you describe a creature of pure disorder?
In some ways, you don't really know what it really looks like because it's probably...
It doesn't have a true form.
Yeah.
It doesn't have any sort of fixed form.
so how do you tell the difference between a boggle and a gorp?
Well, a boggle is sentient.
Yeah.
So that's a big, I'm sure a boggle could take the form of a gorp. But a gorp can't take the form of a boggle. So.
And Gorp would be kind of boring, long term,
Yeah.
so...
You don't want to meet a boggle.
There is, it occurs to me, still one big mystery of Glorantha left unanswered.
Okay.
What the fuck is up with Belentar?
Oh, the God King.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but
The Pharaoh.
The God King is, there is part of the God King that will always be a mystery, very deliberately, which is, what was Belentar before he washed up on the shores of the Holy Country?
So we are never getting a definite answer to that.
No, we don't know. We deliberately don't want to know, because that's part of the mystery of him.
Are we ever going to get to see Belentar's book, either in finished?
Well, stick around.
Okay.
Stick around until later this evening.
Yeah, future of Glorantha.
When we talk about the future of Glorantha, because that's just as the guide is the completion of material that Greg had put together over many
Especially
years.
in terms of maps.
Yeah, many years. Belentar's book was something that Greg put together for a specific purpose, which I want to talk about in the second panel, that will be being finished. And I think I'm just gonna.
That's enough for
That's enough for right now, because I'm gonna force you guys to stick around.
Yeah, and we have more people actually signed up for the later.
Yeah, the later one got
So
more
that's
people,
why we're
because I
just
think
not
there's
starting
less
over.
events in.
conflict.
If you guys are, hopefully you're staying.
Oh, yes.
And we don't have, there's nothing in the room between this one and the next one.
Yeah.
So.
So I'm happy to answer. I'm happy to answer any question, because pretty much what's all in the guide, and then I'm happy to also talk about things from an extra, because a lot of Gloranthan, just like with anything else, and going back to Tolkien, a lot of the stories in the Silmarillion and in Lord of the Rings, he has its origins in World War I. And there's a lot of Glorantha that has origins in the events and personal biography of Greg Stafford. That's because Glorantha is it is more than purely just a fantasy role-playing game setting. It is a literary creation.
Okay, here's a wild question. What would happen if a overambitious lunar travel and journeyer tried to prove that Brastilos was the Red Goddess? I don't expect anything.
Brastilos, the No Wind.
Yeah, well, I mean, come on. Orlanth's seventh breath, the embodiment.
There is one big, huge, giant issue. If something's going to be part of the Red Goddess, it's got to have some moon celestial connotation. And if you don't have that at all, that's going to be what was it that we informally call the difficulty level beyond nearly impossible?
Okay, I see.
Because at a certain point that becomes, well, what if a god learner tried to prove that Orlanth is really Ernalda?
Yeah, well.
Well, come on.
I'm just.
They wouldn't succeed.
Queen of the world. Orlanth has changed his gender more than at least once.
Well, again, just huge Lunar fanboy that
I love the Lunars.
I keep thinking.
Okay, first off, I love the Lunars. And if you look in that book, what's the biggest section in the entire book?
Lunar Empire.
The Lunar Empire.
There's a table of contents if you want to see the page count related to that.
I mean, there is more material, and Nick really worked a lot with me on the Lunar Empire material. And there is more on the Lunar Empire in this book that has ever been in
Which book?
In the guide, the forthcoming guide to Glorantha, because I love the Lunars.
And Greg did a lot of work.
Greg loves the Lunars.
I love them too, but I never understood the crater.
The crater is where physically where the moon was yanked out of.
Yeah, grab Wunschworth.
It's one of the gateways to the moon, right?
The moon is right below the crater. Is right above the crater.
So let's go right here.
Yep.
So when the Red Goddess did her big dance, this section of Earth was pulled out.
Yep.
It was simply pulled out and is now,
250 miles?
no, it's halfway to the top of the Sky Dome. So it's, I think it's about here. So that's about 15 feet, would you say?
Yeah,
Yeah, so it's about here.
about 5 meters.
So the red moon is floating right about here. And when it was pulled out, the surrounding Earth was lifted up. So there's a 2-mile high mountain range right in the middle of Darahapa.
Perfectly circular.
Perfectly circular.
And Darahapans love that, I bet.
And it's pulled right out all the way down to the underworld. So that goes straight down into hell.
And there's the what's it called, the Silver Bridge too.
There's
right?
the Silver Bridge that connects between Glamour.
Oh, there's a pic. We got a picture of that.
Yeah. Does anybody want to see? Ooh.
Yes.
Yeah,
One thing I'd love to spend a few minutes, time permitting, is go through a little bit of the art.
Oh, yeah.
And stuff
Yes.
like that.
Well, those big Yanpopsis plates, I'm really excited about those. They look
Well, I know
gorgeous.
this one is the Yan one, not the one with the crater and all that.
I thought they have a meter, so we should be able to back it up to Jeff's computer. We can take a break, you can drink and stuff.
Use the, instead of view with the list, make it the,
Train him on it.
there you are.
Yep, train him, Rick.
If you click on, oh, you closed it.
I didn't close it. It's still there.
No, I mean, you covered it up, man, but you can display bigger icons.
Thumbnails.
Thumbnails, that's what I. But yeah. You got the crater.
So this is
Canyon
Rabanth.
wall over
This
on
is
the
the temple of Yom in Rabanth.
Mm-hmm.
And there's always a beam from the top of the temple to the sun.
Mm-hmm.
And that's described in Groy and a few other sources. Here is Glamour. This is a very high DPI image, so it's not coming out terribly clear. But here's Glamour, and here's the Silver Bridge. And if you look at this, it lines up pretty well with the Glamour picture that was in the Red Moon, the one that Nick and Julie Gidlow and Greg worked on.
No, that is the Guide to Glamour.
The Guide to Glamour.
Guide to Glamour.
And you have up here the crater itself, Glamour, and that's when we put these together. We gave the artist portions of the map from a vantage point, so she could see the approximate distances between things. And we didn't want to do a close-up of Glamour, in part because I wanted to be able to get this book out on any sort of a reasonable amount of time. And
Can you explain the picture?
yeah, okay, this is the Temple of Yom. It's called the Footstool.
That's the temple, yeah.
Yeah, that's the footstool. This is the central square. These are the 8 golden statues that represent the sons of Yom. The Ian Groy Temple of Yom is described as being decorated with paintings of the various important deities. This is the city of Rabound out here. Sacred processional. This is the processional way leading north.
Is that the God's Wall?
That is an exaggerated, and it will say in the caption for this that this is the height and the prominence of the God's Wall is exaggerated.
So it's an artificial structure. I thought
No, it's a natural structure that looks an awful lot like a wall.
Oh.
This is Glorantha, man.
Ah, of course.
This is Glorantha. You can have, was not made by men.
Well,
This was made by Lodrell.
Lodrell.
And this was made by Lodrell, and then Lodrell took a
Big roller.
a cylinder, what was it? Cylinder seal.
Cylinder
Oh,
seal.
yeah.
And just rolled the cylinder seal against the wall, and that it came up with one that I'm really particularly pleased with, which is the God's Wall. And this will be in, this is a multi-page, that's not the final, we're using the gray one. This one. So this is actually the 100 gods of the God's Wall.
Including the ones that are scratched out.
Including ones that are scratched out.
Scratch out those gods.
Instead of the stick figures, it's presented in the Glorious Reascent. This is what the picture was supposed to look like.
Greg's better with maps than Mark.
Yeah.
Sort of unrelated question, but the solar teachings, from the supplements, it looked like it worked pretty well in the Lunar Empire, but not so well in Ralios.
The which?
Nisolar's teachings.
Nice lore.
Oh, Nizalor. Nizalor. Nizalor, when it got to Ralios, Nizalorian illumination was embraced in Ralios by the folk around Lake Felster. When they then tried to introduce it into Seshnella amongst the Malchioni, initially the Malchioni rejected it completely. The Nizalorians concluded that it was more that getting the expanding Nizalor into Seshnella was extraordinarily important if we were going to ever have the unity and harmony of the Golden Age again, and that the ends would have to justify the ends therefore justified any means. So they they introduced they made their sacrifices to Malia, introduced the Malia cult into Seshnella, creating a great plague in Seshnella, which they then lifted when the Seshnellan ruling class was willing to embrace Nizalor.
Ralice, it's riddled by so-called riddlers.
There are riddlers. There is still
Why didn't
Nizalor.
they sort of diffuse into Seshnella? The riddlers?
Well, you mean where there are we? You talking in the Third Age
I'm
or the
talking
First
about
Age?
illumination. The
Yeah,
riddlers.
there's illumination everywhere in Glorantha. Are you talking about Nizalorian illumination in the First Age or in the Third Age?
Third Age.
Okay, in the Third Age, you still have people that have preserved the secrets of Nizalor in every place that was part of the Bright Empire. There's not big numbers of them anywhere outside of the Lunar Empire.
The Orlanthi straight up kill anyone who starts asking too many weird questions.
Yep, because Nizalor is the Orlanthi and the trolls and the Malchioni are all in agreement that Nyzlor is one of the most awful chaos gods around. Yeah, it's Gabaji. Whereas the Pelorians and quite a few other cultures, were the elves, for example, believe that no, Nyzlor is a light god, a god of light, god of illumination in the sense of revealed wisdom that is going to restore the world of the damages caused in the Gods of War.
Well then, dilemma.
And their bit is that Arkat is Gabaji the Destroyer, and it's that Arkat that the Orlanthi, the Trolls, and the Malchioni inflicted on the world, and that's the horrible chaos god.
It's annoying because whenever you see a reference to Gabaji, you have to figure out from context whether they're talking about Nyzlor or Arkat.
Or both.
Or both, yeah.
And that's one of the other, I mean, I love Arkat and Nyzlor.
Well, wasn't the phrase Arkat and Nyzlor fought and Gabaji was defeated?
Or Gabaji won.
Well, yeah, that's right.
Or another one is, the reference is, and this is also in the guide, is there was a great battle, and most say Arkat emerged from Durastor, but that Arkat was changed and was not the Arkat that had entered.
Was that a good thing or a bad thing? I mean...
Well, the Dark Empire, the Autarchy, was actually a very peaceful, well-administered, not terribly ruthless.
Not chaotic at all.
Certainly not chaotic, and what Arkat spent the next 50 years doing is more or less meditating. You know, sat there in the lotus position, you know, meditating on the secrets of the universe, and periodically one of his followers would say, well, you know, Tribe X and Tribe Y have a dispute, oh great one. What shall they do? Well, have them, you know, don't disturb me. Don't disturb me. Have them solve their, you know, don't disturb me. Was probably what he,
nobody wanted to make him mad.
And so it was the followers of Arkat, the Archons, would go in to, you know, King X and King Y and say, the Great One says, solve your problem. Don't disturb him. You wouldn't like it if you disturb him. And so what did King X and King Y do? Peacefully resolve their issue rather than interrupt Arkat in his meditations. And that's the Dark Empire. And oh, by the way, the Archons would say, and before we'll let you even get to the point that you would disturb them, see all these trolls that are sitting there outside of Arkat's little meditation hut? The thousands and thousands and thousands of trolls? If you get too much out of line, they'll take care of you.
Sounds like Prowlerella, only with trolls.
Yeah, there's another one.
Stick out.
Who's
the Ibis? Or Ibis?
That is, she's the short-skirted one, so I believe that is it Sir Ensley?
Sir
Is
Ensley.
the nasty slut of herring goddesses? Or she's the store goddess. And she's the lascivious one.
That's why.
Yes, there's two, there's...
Long-legged one.
Where is it? Yeah, I think that's Sir Ensley. Sir Ensley or
It is Sir
Ensley?
Ensley. It is Sir Ensley.
I mean, I'd have to look at the book there. Each one of these will be, you know, given a number. There'll be a breakdown of the book.
Well, this one we have a numbered list of what's on here, describing who each person is. It's not just here's a picture with loads of great stuff. So it is, you know, three-page spread.
Well, one of the cool things when I was doing Darahapa Stirs with Greg, we talked a lot about the God's Wall, and I don't know if this has found its way into the guide. Is it still the case that You go to the God's Wall, you obviously propitiate a certain god. Does the icon of the god animate and relate directly to you? So you go and look at Sir Ensleeve, and it will look back at you, and it will reply to you, and it will interact with you. And I always thought that was a really cool touch that Greg came up with. Did that find its way in?
No.
No? That's a shame.
No, but I mean, a whole lot of Glorantha religious ceremonies work like that anyway.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, you go there because the God's Wall, you can interact with the gods of the God's Wall because the God's Wall is a place where it's extremely easy to contact the other world. And the guide is not going to. I also don't mention the bit that the Israelians deal with this with their statues and their paintings. I mean, that's a normal thing, that representations of the divine are how you interact with the divine.
We go back.
What I would like to do, guys,
we only have a few minutes.
Yeah, we've got about 40 minutes worth of recording time on the SD card that we've got here. We probably need to put it on charge. It's 20 to 10. I don't know if people want to, get a drink and refresh before we start again on the next session.
Is that okay with folks?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.